Greetings, friends. Back again here. Today, I thought we could talk a little bit about, adjust my camera, astrology, politics, and the Archons. Um, so, to preface, um, I've been practicing astrology since I was about 19 or 20. So, I mean, studying. I shouldn't say practicing because I try not to practice. Um, but I did work as an astrologer for a while in my 30s. I mean, it was not my full time job. Because I always felt kind of conflicted because part of, if you've ever been around this, part of, it turns into a kind of therapy, and you know, you don't want to get into the trap of having people be addicted to therapy, right? So that they're reliant on you, and you're reliant on them for an income. So after I'd done astrology for a while, I saw I don't like this. I don't like the way this feels. So at one point, I stopped charging people for astrological readings, and then I just refused to do readings for people because they place too much emphasis on it. Though I still do a reading once a year for my friend who does my taxes, because it's the only time we get to talk. But she does one for me too, so we're kind of like just it's like it's BSing for us anyway. But I've never stopped paying attention, but I am to astrology and to the movements of the planets. I'm also really interested in the movements of the planets as far as being a biodynamic farmer goes, because where the placement of the moon and the relationship of the planets to each other is really important in biodynamic farming. So I'm really attentive to that. So probably more than most people. But as far as doing astrological readings and things like that, don't do too much of it. I try to avoid it, though I do keep an eye on where planets are in transit to my own natal chart. Pay attention to that. What I've found over the years is the good transits are never as good as you hope, and the bad ones are always worse. So, tell me if that's your experience, because it's mine for sure. But what I want to talk about is I've really been paying attention to the movements of, especially the outer planets, over the last 5 years. During COVID, actually, started paying a little bit of attention. There was this Indian boy away from India, maybe 14 or 15 years old, who was doing some Vedic astrology about COVID. It was really interesting what he was saying, and I think he was onto something. But so started paying more attention then, and what I noticed, probably more than I had noticed before, was that, and I had noticed it before, but not to this extent, to how world events and political machinations were corresponding to the movements of the outer planets, and in a big way. So, for instance, one of them was the Saturn Uranus square that was in, I think it was on 2021, which coincided with all the lockdowns and all that kind of stuff, and the craziness across most of the world about COVID. And so I've been paying attention a lot since then. And about a year ago on my Substack, a year ago this January, so 10 months ago, 10 and a half months ago, I wrote this, and I'll read what I wrote and see what you think. Hold on. So here we go. So here's what I wrote. Pluto moves into Aquarius in January of 2024. In a couple of weeks, Pluto will move into Aquarius. Every time Pluto moves into a new sign, a shift in world events happens, always corresponding to the qualities of the sign into which Pluto moves. Pluto, the god of the underworld and riches, is a volatile little bugger, so it usually trashes the joint before letting the dust settle. When Pluto moved into Capricorn in January 2008, for example, that coincided with the financial crisis that messed up or ruined the financial security of millions, if not billions, of people, while the banksters themselves became obscenely rich. If you've seen or read the film or read the book, The Big Short, you know what I'm talking about. Pardon me. With Pluto moving into Aquarius, I would say that the age of the banksters, and with it the industrial military pharmaceutical complex, is coming to an end. One can only perpetuate massive fraud for so long. It will probably be disruptive for everyone in the short term, but Aquarius is the sign of freedom and innovation, which should be good, kind of like when the internet first became a democratizing force. Before the World Economic Forum, the FBI and the CIA got all up in freedom's grill. But note, the Archons know this and will try everything they can to avoid the inevitable. But it is inevitable. Nothing lasts forever. Pluto will back into Capricorn for 6 weeks or so in late summer, but the energy is moving toward Aquarius. Now, here's the thing. So Pluto moved, so it goes retrograde and was moving backwards into Capricorn. And that happened, I think, in September. And then it just moved into Aquarius a few days ago, which is the sign of freedom, innovation. You can say technology as well. And each sign and each movement has a good side and a bad side, just like every person does, right? Now, here's the thing, though. When the day before, or just hours before, actually, Pluto moved into Aquarius, is when President Joe Biden authorized the use of long-range ballistic missiles into Ukraine. You know, for the Ukrainians to use our missiles, which have to be guided by the United States. So it's kind of an act of war, and people, as you know, have been worried about World War III ever since, relying on the restraint of Vladimir Putin. I mean, that's a thin thread to hang something on. But you know, so here it is, right before Pluto moves into Aquarius. That happens at the same time. Maybe it was the next day. What's his name? Keir Starmer met with the head of BlackRock. I mean, these are the banksters, right? These are the banksters. These guys who've been rigging the economy at least since 2008, right? Under the auspices of Barack Obama. I'll never forget Barack Obama when he named, what was his name? Timothy Geithner as the Treasury Secretary. And the guy owed like $75,000 in back taxes because he didn't pay taxes on some migrant workers he had working on his estate. You know, that doesn't have. I never have that problem. In fact, it's lucky. I'm lucky if I make $75,000 a year. It's crazy, right? So this is what I've been noticing for a while now, and I wrote about this earlier. I actually on the video I did recently on the Archons was about the same thing, because I am certain, and certainly they act like it, that they know astrology, and they're trying to, capitalize, to use capitalist humor, trying to capitalize on the way they can rig things to their advantage. Now, I don't think, as I said, that they can really rig things in their advantage anymore. Because it just, astrology is about cycles, and cycles come to an end, and cycles begin, and that cycle is coming to an end, right? and I think it's indisputable that the last, since 2008, so almost 20 years, it has been a period of the banksters, right? Of BlackRock and the military industrial complex, or the pharmaceutical giants colluding with government. I mean, it's all about the money, right? It's all about the money. But that's coming to an end. At least that the way it's coming to an end that way, according to astrology, and I don't see how it can't. So I paused there. I blanked out for a second. Um, so that's one thing, right? And another thing that I noticed a while ago was Jupiter conjunct. Well, before I go there. One of the things I noticed was that my expectation. So prediction is a tough game, right? Because you never know how it's going to happen. You know something's going to happen when you look at astrology. You don't know what's going to happen exactly. You know kind of the area in which it will happen. We don't know what the actual events will be. um, so what I thought was going to happen with Pluto not going into Aquarius until after the election, I suspected that there would be widespread voter fraud like we saw in 2020, but that didn't. Well, there was some. I don't think it wasn't enough for sure to flip the election. But what I noticed though, about when Pluto went direct, when Pluto went direct, which about 3 weeks before the election, there was a vibe shift. You might have noticed it too. Now, the vibe, because it seemed to me, at least this is according to the propaganda, like there seemed to be some movement in the Kamala Harris campaign. They seem to be gaining momentum, but that could also be just propaganda. I'm sure a lot of it is, but certainly that was the mood though, and a lot of what you sense in astrology is the way things feel, right? There's a mood to it as well as an event. But I think when Pluto went direct, it seemed like it was a big vibe shift. And now I'm not saying this is what was an absolute result of this, but corresponding to that was when Donald Trump did these. I think they were brilliant publicity stunts. The one when he was working at McDonald's, and the other one with the garbage truck. I thought those were brilliant. And but that around that time, the mood shifted, and I was surprised actually when he won, because of even though the mood had shifted, I was still surprised he won, because I expected widespread cheating. But I did expect that after the election, things would get it would come to a head when Pluto moved into Aquarius, where things would start to be revealed, and we'll see. I think when we are seeing, I think they're showing their hand. When we saw, a lame duck president basically, come close to declaring World War III 2 months before his opponent could take office, and you also saw it with, all of a sudden the Republican or the Democrats want to get all these judges installed, so they're working late nights for a change, huh? It's kind of sabotage, right? To the sabotage of the Trump agenda. But whatever. But because I think this is not just about Trump. I mean, it's much bigger than Trump. What's going on? And I think you saw that with Trump. And another part of the vibe shift was when Bobby Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard and all these people who were traditionally lefties or Democrats sided with Trump. So that was part of the vibe shift, and I think it's unmistakable. I think there are a lot of people who would get on, and I'm sure a lot of people out there watching this now are angry, but I don't care, because it is what it is, people. But as I argued in this Substack from January 2024, where it really gets interesting is 2025, right? So let me give you a couple examples of where it gets interesting. So what happened? The main thing, pardon me, is when Neptune enters Aries on March 31st, and actually, probably more on April Fool's Day, April 1st. Now, why is that important? Well, anytime one of those outer planets moves into a new sign, like with Pluto going into um, Aquarius, there's a vibe shift. New things start to happen, and what happens with Neptune moving into Aries. Well, Aries, 0 degrees of Aries is the first day of spring sign or place. The place in the zodiac where the first day of spring is. That's the spring equinox, right? Um, Now, this, a lot of astrologers and people predict kind of age of Aquarius vibe that happens with Neptune coming into Aries because it starts over. It's like begin again. It's the reset button. This is the great reset. This is the real great reset. It's not the one the World Economic Forum is pushing. This is the real great reset. Is Neptune going into Aries? Um, so what I suspect, pardon me, I got this horrible congestion right now. So what I expect is going to happen is that this will be an initiation. Since Aries is the beginning of the zodiac, it's like an initiation of a new period of history, and these outer planets move really slowly through the zodiac. So, so I suspect that this could usher in a new era of spirituality and optimism. I also suspect that what we've been seeing over the last few years is kind of anticipating, with people getting more interested in psychotherapy using psychedelics. That might be more of a thing too. With all this, there are dangers as well. So everything is not perfect and good. It's not. There's a bad side too. so I think that's one of the things is it's really an opening that's going to happen. I think a real revolutionary change of consciousness. I think it's possible. But there's more that's going on in 2025. And another thing that's happening in 2025 is Saturn will be conjunct Neptune, right? And I just said Neptune moves into Aries, so this is a big deal. Now, what's cool about this this aspect is this is the same one that happened, and I remember it very well, and it was totally optimistic in 1989 with the fall of communism. Eastern Bloc communism started to fall, but the Berlin Wall went down. Also, Tiananmen Square was around that time. Now, the thing is, though, and I don't know if you were alive then, it was a super optimistic time for me. This happened actually. This conjunction was right on my sun. And speaking of my son, my then wife was pregnant with my first son. So I was totally optimistic, and I remember thinking when the Berlin Wall was going down, watching it on television, thinking, "Wow, the world my son lives in will be a much better world." How wrong I was! How wrong I was! But it did end. It did end something and begin something. It ended communism to a degree, but what happened is the Archons, as I've called them, right, the world rulers, who also know astrology, and these banksters, this eventually ushered in their rise to power. And as we can see, where and it's interesting, since that time, too, China has become more capitalist in that time. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon, right? But nevertheless, that signaled a change. Now, this conjunction does not happen in Capricorn, right? The Capricorn is the sign of bankers and wealth and stinginess. My son's a Capricorn. Sorry, son. But Aries is a sign of new beginnings, and initiative. Initiative is probably a really great word to use. An initiative. So I think that bodes well, at least, at least in the terms of destroying uh, the current world order, which needs destroying, if you ask me, right? So that's important. Another thing that happens, Jupiter will trine Saturn, and Uranus will trine Pluto, and this is September to December of 2025. This is a kind of a big deal because trines are signs of good luck, you could say, right? They're beneficent. And so Jupiter trining Saturn is bringing peace where there was strife. And a similar thing happens with Uranus trines Pluto in September. These aspects bode well for a peaceful and prosperous type of change, right? So I think we're going to see some disruption earlier, but I think once we start going through 2025, it's going to be. I think it'll be, Michael Millerman. I don't know if you know him. He's a philosopher. He wrote a book on Alexander Dugin. Was the only person I think in America, in the English-speaking world, to write a book on Dugin, which you should know about it because people were talking a lot of smack about Dugin, and Dugin, from what I can tell, is a pretty traditionalist kind of philosopher. I mean, he's one of his favorite philosophers is one of my favorite philosophers, Nikolai Berdyaev. But what happened with Millerman is he got all kinds of flack from academia, so he left because he wrote that book. But Michael Millerman thinks, we could be heading for what he terms an American Renaissance. I don't know if I would go that far. I hope so. I'm not really hedging my bets because I've kind of been pushing for a kind of a transfiguration of society for a long time now. But these kinds of aspects, though, suggest that Millerman's got good. He's on to something, right? He's feeling something, and I think that's like I said, a lot of what happens with astrology is it's how you feel. You get the feeling, get the mood of the country, or you get the, you feel the vibe shift or whatever it is, right? Now, so I'm going to end with a little warning. Because they're cyclical. I mean, astrology is not it's not fate necessarily, but I always compare it to weather prediction because you're looking at atmospheric conditions with both weather and astrology, and you can extrapolate from that and say, well, this is kind of what you can expect. I mean, and with weather, sometimes you're wrong, sometimes you're right, but in general, we put a lot of trust, I think, in the weather report. And I think astrology is the same way. Now, what happens in astrology, it's always the interpretation that can get wrong. Because it's so hard you can't really, there are so many moving parts in astrology, and there are so many moving parts in human will. But I should say that the way I learned astrology, and one of my first astrology teachers, and it was good advice. He said, the way you learn how transits work, just see what happens to people when a transit happens, right? And that tells you. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. I mean, and you can say the same thing with the movements of the planets, especially the outer planets. The inner planets not such. It's more personal, but the outer planets really seem to indicate world events. Political movements. And especially the things that take place over a longer period of time. And I don't mean hundreds of years, but certainly decades, right? As we saw with 2000 when Pluto moved into Capricorn. So with that, I will say, I want to remind you, I am doing this course on Shakespeare, Magic, and Religion. And I know a lot about those things because I did a PhD on Magic and Religion in literature. And please, if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and hit the like button. But more importantly, let me know what you think in the comments because this is a pretty esoteric topic, but I think it's also very practical. I'm a very practical human being, So let's keep the conversation going, and I will talk to you next time. God bless.